Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be chatting about my number one favorite product from each brand at the drugstore. So I'm not covering every single drugstore brand, but this is like the biggest, most popular drugstore brands. If you would like to see a follow-up video on this with some of the smaller brands or maybe some indie brands or even a high-end version, definitely let me know. But this is a video that I've done now over the past couple of years, ever since I started my channel. I usually do it in the spring, and I like to do an updated version once a year just to kind of see if I still feel the same way or if my favorite product has changed. And surprisingly, when I was looking back to see what my favorites were over the last couple of years, I realized I didn't do this video last year. I did it 3 years ago, I did it 2 years ago in 2019, but for some reason last year I didn't do it. I'm guessing it's just because of everything that was going on last spring and it probably just wasn't at the top of my mind. So I don't have last year to look back on, but in some ways that's actually good because now it's been 2 years and it's really interesting to see if there have been any changes since then. So let's go ahead and jump right in. We will start with the first brand, which is L'Oreal. So L'Oreal has a lot of really, really great products that I love. They have the Lash Paradise mascara, the Age Perfect foundation that I've really been loving. Also, the Age Perfect satin blushes are beautiful. But I have to say, I'm going to stick with my number one favorite that's been the favorite since 2018, 2019. Still my favorite today from L'Oreal, and that is the Magic Perfecting Base Primer. So those of you who have been around on this channel for a while have already known about this. I talk about it constantly. It is just my favorite primer. I've repurchased this now, I don't know, probably like 10 times ever since it came out back in like 2015. But there's just something magic about this primer. It has this kind of fluffy, whipped texture. It's a little bit on the thicker side, so if you don't like the feeling of something a little thicker on your face, then you're probably not gonna like this, but I like it because being 43 now, I have a lot of fine lines, I have pores that are visible that I didn't have when I was younger, and this just kind of erases all of that. So let me just show you guys a before and after of my skin without the primer on the left-hand side and then with the primer on the right, and it just looks like I kind of airbrushed the photo a little bit, just kind of took away those pores, smoothed out my skin's texture. It's really beautiful. And whenever I wear this out and I see friends, family, anybody who I haven't seen in a while, they're always like, what have you been doing with your skincare? Your skin looks amazing and flawless. And really, it's just this. I feel like my foundation goes on smoother on top of it. It just makes everything look better. So I am really hoping that they never discontinue this. L'Oreal, if you're watching, please don't discontinue my favorite product ever. I will be so upset, and I'm probably gonna have to buy a million jars to get me through. I really haven't tried any other primer that's like this. I think the one that comes the very closest is the Tarte Timeless Smoothing Primer, but that one's a lot more expensive and it has a really strong baby powder scent. This one doesn't smell like anything, which I prefer. So anyway, that is L'Oreal. Moving on to Maybelline. Back in 2018, 3 years ago, my favorite was the Age Rewind Concealer. Same thing with 2 years ago in 2019. But definitely I have moved on since then. I still like the Age Rewind Concealer. I think it's a good one at the drugstore. I also really enjoy their Nudes of New York palette. That one was kind of vying for my top spot because it's just one of the better eyeshadow palettes at the drugstore as far as formula goes. Plus, the color story is almost identical to Soft Glam. So I really like that as well. But my number one top product from Maybelline is definitely the Lifter glosses. These are incredible. They feel so high end. They remind me a lot of the Tower 28 lip glosses, which I talked about in my latest dupes video. This particular shade Amber that I'm wearing today is a really great dupe for Tower 28's Cashew. But also I love how they're kind of like a liquid lip balm. They're not sticky like a gloss would be. They're so hydrating on your lips. I tend to just wear these around like during the day just to keep my lips hydrated and smooth. They have a really great vanilla scent to them. I mean, it's everything I could possibly want in a lip gloss. They also contain hyaluronic acid, which is supposed to just like plump out your lip lines a little bit and make everything look a little bit smoother, which I appreciate as well. So this is an amazing lip gloss. If you haven't tried these yet, definitely try them. I think you're gonna love it. All right, so next moving on to CoverGirl. My favorite back in 2018 and 2019 was the Supersizer Mascara. And I have to say, I do still really love that one. I think it's one of the better mascaras at the drugstore, at least for me. It gives great length and volume. It doesn't smudge. It lasts all day, even in the non-waterproof version. So I'm a big fan of that one. And really, this was tough because that was sort of at my #1 spot, but I found something else from CoverGirl really recently that I think I like a little bit better just because I wear a lot of mascaras. I rotate through quite a few that I like, but this was a big surprise and something that I've been using almost every single day, and that is the Simply Ageless Instant Wrinkle Blurring Pressed Powder. So I feel like I've talked about this a lot in several recent videos too, so I'm not going to go on too much about it. I did a whole video on it too, so if you're curious, I'll link that above. You can check it out, but this is not actually marketed as a powder foundation, but that's just how I like to use it, and it just makes my skin look so smooth and so flawless. I actually use it right on top of the L'Oreal primer, and the combination works so beautifully. I just let this one set down for about a minute or so, and then this goes right on top of it so well. And what I love about it is that it doesn't look powdery on my skin and it doesn't accentuate my pores. It actually tends to blur them even further. I like to use it with the puff that comes with it. I just swirl it in the powder, press it onto my skin, and that's it. I haven't tried it with a brush, so I feel like the coverage might be a little bit less if you tried to just swirl it on your face with a brush. So I would definitely try it with the puff first and see what you think of it. But a lot of you guys have said since my video on this that you've tried it and you love it too. I was just shocked because I am not a powder person. I have really dry skin, and almost every single powder I've ever tried, even ones that people tell me look flawless on dry skin, I just feel like they don't, and they look cakey, or I can see the powder sitting on my skin and I just feel like it looks really drying. This doesn't. I don't know how they did it, but it's amazing. So I think this is definitely at the top of my list when it comes to CoverGirl. Moving on to Revlon. This is a brand that I don't always buy from. I don't have a lot of favorites from them, but I do have a couple. 3 years ago, my favorite was their Sunlit Dream highlighting palette. So that was actually a really nice highlighting palette. It was super smooth and just really beautiful on the skin. Also, 2 years ago, my favorite was the Cheeky Tint blush, and those are also really great. I don't think they make them anymore though, unfortunately. That's something that I really wish they would have kept in their line, especially because now, versus 2 years ago, I think that cream and liquid blushes are definitely seeing like a huge boom right now. Everybody's loving them. So I feel like if they had released those now, it would have been a lot better. So I'm kind of sad that I can't find those anymore. They were really great. But when it comes to the #1 spot, this was tough because I really love their new Glass Shine lipsticks. I think they're amazing. I love their super lustrous lipsticks as well. They're just really creamy and have a nice formula. But I'm gonna go with their SkinLights Prismatic highlighters. If you didn't see my recent dupes video, I'll link that above. This is a perfect, most exact dupe for the Amrezy highlighter from Anastasia Beverly Hills. That one has been discontinued. It's not around anymore. And this just has the most beautiful formula. It's baked, it's made in Italy. It's one of the smoothest, nicest highlighters out there on the market. And I am not really a highlighter person, but I absolutely love this one. It's so smooth. It works amazingly for an inner corner highlight as well. This is the shade Daybreak Glimmer that I have, and I'll show you guys quickly the swatch that I showed in my dupes video with this next to the Amrezy, and you really cannot tell the difference, both in the way they feel and the color is super similar as well, especially once it's blended out on your cheeks. So I think when it comes to Revlon, this is definitely my #1, and I think it's just so high quality. All right, guys, so next up we have Physicians Formula, and back in 2018 and 2019, my favorite product from them was the Butter Bronzer. It still is, but this time it's kind of with a twist because they have a new palette out, or it's like relatively new. It came out in 2020 and it includes the Butter Bronzer and a few other products, but I just use this all the time, and that is their Whaley palette. So inside you have some of their highlighters, 2 of their blushes, and then 2 of their Butter Bronzers. And I find myself using this one way more than just picking up the Butter Bronzer by itself, because on days when I feel like using the Butter Bronzer, I just grab this, and I also use one of the butter blushes as well, sometimes the highlight occasionally, but these blushes also are limited edition shades and they are beautiful, particularly the Wildflower shade. I love this one so much. So overall, I just was really surprised by this palette and I reached for it so much more than I ever thought I would. So this is definitely at my #1 spot when it comes to Physicians Formula. Okay, so next up, moving on to e.l.f. This was such a hard decision because I feel like since the last time I did this video in 2019, their brand has just gone up several notches. They are so amazing compared to what they used to be, and they've come out with so many great products in the last 2 years. So for 2018 and 2019, my pick was their Beautifully Bare face palette. And this palette, I still like it. I think it's beautiful. I don't even know if they still make it, but at least for my skin tone, all of the colors worked so beautifully. The blushes were gorgeous, the highlight and the bronzer, it wasn't too deep. It was just the perfect amount, just on those really light makeup days. So I still really love this palette, but it's definitely not my favorite from the brand anymore. I mean, I was thinking of the putty blushes that I love, the sheer slick lipsticks, the satin lipsticks, their little bite-sized eyeshadow palettes, and the cheek palettes are amazing as well. I mean, so many good things, but at the end of the day, I think my favorite product that e.l.f. has ever come out with that I still use all the time, that I'm wearing on my eyes today, is their Earthen Ocean palette. So I actually did a whole video on this as well couple years ago now, or maybe it was last year, I can't remember, but I'll link it above. And I did several different looks with this palette, and I think that's what I love about it so much. Not only is the formula really, really good, and these palettes are very hit and miss, I feel like, but this one is so good. And I love how it's kind of divided into two 9-pan palettes. You have the ocean side over here with all these beautiful blues, and then you have the earth side over here with the browns and greens and the yellow. And I'm not really a blue eyeshadow person, but these blues are a little bit more subdued. They're not super bright, and I just think they look absolutely beautiful on your eyes, especially in the summertime. I like to use this side of the palette a lot more. And there's one particular shade in this palette, which I talked about in that video. It's this one right here called Tundra, and it's this really gorgeous topper, or at least I think it's a topper. It's a little bit more metallic than the rest of the shades in the palette, and it's a little bit more on the sheer side. So it is the perfect topper. And in that video, I showed how this shade could transform any of the other shades in the palette if you just put this one on top. So for today's look, I used this Sahara shade for my lid, which is a gorgeous green, but it's not super metallic. It's not super shimmery. I mean, it's beautiful, but today I just wanted a little something extra. So I took this Tundra shade and put it on top, and it kind of changed the color of the green a little bit from more of this yellowy green into something different. So I'm showing you guys right now a swatch of what it looked like by itself and then with this shade on top. So it does that with every single shade in the palette. I've used it on top of some of the blues. I've used it on top of some of like the taupes and the browns, and it's equally as beautiful on top of everything. So I just love this palette. I feel like it's really slept on. Not a lot of people talk about it. I mean, I'm sure they did when it first launched, but I don't hear anybody mention it anymore, but I use it all the time and I love it. Next up, when it comes to Flower Beauty, this is another really tough one. I did a whole top 10 video of my favorite products from Flower Beauty, so I will go ahead and link that above in case you want to check that out. But there's so many good products. Their Jungle Lights palette, which I just talked about in my dupes video, those shimmer shades rival even some of my favorite shimmers, like from Sydney Grace. I also love their Heat Wave bronzer. I'm wearing that today. I think it's the most amazing bronzer ever. What else? I love their Petal Pout lipsticks. I love their new Perfect Pout lipsticks, which are a little more glossy. There's just so many amazing products. Oh, their new serum foundation. That one's another really good one. There's really too many to list, honestly. This was such a tough choice. But looking back in 2018, I chose the Flower Pots blush as my #1 pick. And then 2 years ago in 2019, I chose their Petal Pout lipsticks. And really those two are very interchangeable. I think I use both of them all the time. But I think for this video, I'm gonna have to stick with my old favorite, which is the Flower Pots blush. They recently came out with new shades of these. I'm wearing the one in Spice Petal today, and I just think these are like the best pressed powder blushes at the drugstore, and even better than some high-end formulas I like, just because of how silky they are. They just blend on your skin so effortlessly. And I think as far as pigmentation goes, they're right in the middle. They're not too pigmented and they're not pigmented. So I think in that way they are so customizable because you can just lightly tap your brush into the pan and get a sheer wash of color, or you can like load up the product and it still never looks cakey or powdery on your cheeks. It's just such an amazing formula, and they have so many beautiful colors to choose from as well. Most of them are matte. There is one more shimmery shade that I really love called Warm Hibiscus, which is also a dupe for NARS Orgasm. So overall, I am still head over heels for Flowers blushes. I think they are so good. Next up, when it comes to Essence, this was another tough one. I love their Lash Princess mascara. I love their blushes that are called The Blush. Those are so fantastic. I mean, really, they have some great products in their line. Their brow product, Make Me Brow, which is a perfect dupe for Benefit's Gimme Brow. That one was kind of like vying for my top spot, but I think I'm still gonna have to go with the answer that I gave in 2018 and 2019, and that is their Pure Nude highlighter. So even though, again, I say like I'm not really a highlighter person, this really to me isn't a highlighter. It's just the most perfect glowy powder. So today, for example, I put this on over my blush as a blush topper, and what I love about this is that it's so subtle as a highlighter that it doesn't look like you're wearing highlight. It just looks like you have glowy skin. This one is also a baked formula too, so it just looks really, really smooth on your skin. And what I like to do with this, instead of putting it just on my cheekbone, I like to take this if I'm wearing a matte blush. Like for example, today, I put on the Flower Beauty blush, which has a matte finish, and then I take my same blush brush and just swirl it around in here and just apply it to my whole cheek, because unlike a lot of highlighters, it's not gonna look like overkill putting it all over your cheek, because all it does is just add a little hint of glow to the blush and it makes it look like you have a glowy blush. So I just think this is such a versatile product. I think there's really nothing else like it at the drugstore, and even more high-end formulas. I think usually when you see a highlighter, they're going for more of that crazy see it from outer space kind of sheen, whereas this is just nice and subtle, exactly the way that I like it. In a way, it kind of reminds me of some of the products from Hourglass and some of their powders. So yeah, this one definitely my #1 pick. Okay, so moving on to Milani. This is another tough one. I have so many favorite products from Milani. Back in 2018, my favorite was their Everyday Eyes palettes, and those are still some of my favorite palettes to this day. I love the formula. Not quite sure why they changed it, because I thought it was really good. Also in 2019, my favorite was their Soft and Sultry palette, which I think had come out back then. And also another favorite palette, I thought that one was just gorgeous. I mean, the formula, also the more cool toned color story. I absolutely love that palette. It's still one of my favorites, even though it has now been discontinued, which I'm so bummed about. So I can't really recommend Milani's eyeshadows anymore because I'm not a fan of the formula. I think they're too powdery overall. But I love so many of their other products that it was really difficult to choose. I love their baked blushes. I love their liquid blushes in the little tube. Those are amazing. I love their concealer. So many good things. But I think when it comes to my #1, it's gotta be these Cheek Kiss cream blushes. These are just fantastic, and I like to compare these all the time to higher end formulas because I think they're just so similar. And what I love about these the most is just how easily they go on your cheeks. They blend out just right away into a powder finish so they don't stay sticky or tacky. You can put powder on top of them right away and it's not gonna stick to it or affect it in any way. I love all the colors that they come in. There's just a beautiful range out there. I actually did a video where I tried all of these on my cheeks, so I will link that video above too in case you want to see that and just see what all the colors look like on versus just swatched. But I feel like these easily compete with any high-end formula that's out there right now. They are just so fantastic. So if you are a fan of cream blushes and you haven't tried these yet, I highly recommend you check them out because they are fabulous. And then last but not least, we have Wet n Wild. And back in 2018, my favorite product from them was their Mega Glow highlighters. And I have to say, these are a really fantastic formula. Again, at the drugstore, I think they could definitely compete with some of the Becca highlighters in terms of like the shine and the smoothness. I think they're really, really great. And then back in 2019, 2 years ago, my favorite product from them was their Color Icon blush in the shade Rose Champagne, which is definitely still one of my favorites. I love that blush. It's like the most perfect, subtle, nude pink, and it's just the most beautiful color. Unfortunately, Wet n Wild has discontinued their old Color Icon blushes. They have a couple of shades out now, but the formula really is not my favorite. I don't know what they did to it, but it just seems a little bit extra powdery. Also, I'm not a big fan of their eyeshadows anymore. The new formulation they have out there was a pretty big letdown for me as well. So I would have to say my favorite Wet n Wild product would have to be their PhotoFocus Stick Foundation. So this stick foundation is really one of the only stick foundations that gets along with my skin. Most of them tend to look, again, really cakey, kind of like that new KVD cream compact foundation. I feel like stick foundations are really similar to those, where they tend to look very heavy, very mask-like. They can cling to like every dry patch and sink into every pore and fine line. But this one doesn't do that at all. It actually is a very close dupe for the Tom Ford foundation stick, which I think is around $88. I have that one as well, and I really cannot tell the difference between the two because they feel exactly the same and they look so similar on my skin, and they both just go on very smoothly. They look just like skin. They don't have that really heavy feel. So I know that this probably isn't for everybody. I've heard people with dry skin kind of tend to like it more than those with oily skin. But for me, it's one of my favorite foundations, especially heading into the summertime when I just want something really quick and easy. So this is definitely at my #1 spot when it comes to Wet n Wild. So anyway, guys, that's everything. Again, if you would like to see a part 2 of this video with more drugstore brands that I didn't cover, or maybe some indie brands, or also maybe a high-end version, definitely let me know in the comments. I'd also love to hear from you. What are your top picks from each drugstore brand as well? Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. As always, I appreciate it so much. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Also, if you love hearing about drugstore products, dupes, and saving money on makeup, definitely don't forget to hit that subscribe button because I cover all of those topics and more here on my channel. So I hope you all have a wonderful day ahead, and I will see you in my next one. Take care, guys. Bye.